Hey, Brother Dave here at Casa Verde Swamp Garden. It's been about, I guess about 9 months since I did a video, and I just thought I'd get out here. What with this coronavirus problem causing supply line issues, and the grand solar minimum causing production issues in agriculture, we are about to run into some major food shortages, which means for us here in the United States, food is going to become a lot more expensive, and about 20% of the population is probably going to go into open rebellion over that. But if you're in a third world country, you're in a world of shit right now, especially, pardon my French, but especially over in Africa where they've got all these locust swarms going. They've got no food. We don't have enough to spare to send to them. That's just the way it's going to work, fellas. All right, well, a little coaching on gardening. Good prior planning prevents piss poor performance is one thing. And prior planning, one of my prior plans that I implemented 10 years ago was planting these bananas, and boy did that work out for me. I got about 100 pounds of bananas last year. Now I wish I'd been thinking about nuts 10 years ago, but no, I just wasn't there yet. But this year we planted 2 pecan trees right here on top of a huge mound of topsoil topped with compost and manure. And on top of that, you'll see I've got a lot of herbs growing too. You see I got dill there, lemon balm, got some stevia, chamomile, fennel over there. You'll see some pineapple sage up on top, right next to a regular sage. And over on the other side, we've got some celery growing too. So I'm making a real efficient use of space by where I've got these new mounds, also planting herbs. And I want those herbs to take over those mounds if possible. Of course, we've got mint growing just ubiquitously, and I get a really nice mint tea just about every day. There's fennel, and there's celery too. It's not the stalk celery, it's the bushy celery, but it has the same flavor. All right. Over here, we're trying some tropical plants called star cherries, and by winter, I'm going to have to box in a little greenhouse over top of these because they will not survive very well for frost. They probably won't produce very well either. And what I can do is just put a little box over top of this thing, a little higher than that window, and then run a cord out the window to a heater for those 3 or 4 nights where we actually do go below freezing. Now, let's get back to the garden. Now this year, since greens are so ubiquitous, you see all that taro over there, that's edible greens. On the other side is a whole bunch of sweet potatoes, that's edible greens as well. So I don't really focus much attention on greens, although carbohydrates are very important. So I've got carbohydrates and protein. I've got potatoes interplanted with, you see the onions right along the edge, right? And then right next to the trellis, I've got peas going. And the theory was that the peas would grow tall enough to grow taller than the potatoes. I might have planted the peas just a little too late, but I've also got some beans going there too. And the beans are interspersed widely so that we're not casting huge amounts of shadow on the ground late in the season. And hopefully that'll help me to get my winter garden going. In the past, it's been hard to get the winter garden going because I've got so much going on the trellises up here that nothing gets any sun. So it's not November till I can plant a winter garden. That's no good. This is a mustard that God grew for me. I started there last year, and I'm going to collect the seeds so I can make mustard. That's a sauce. All right, continuing back, we'll get to this other bed here. Same thing, peas, potatoes, onions, peas, potatoes, onions, peas, potatoes, onions. Some potatoes I bought at the store did not come up, and probably I should have let them age before I put them in the ground. They may come up eventually, but at least right here I know I'm going to get some peas, so I'll have pea seeds for next year. Kiowa blackberry, 3rd season on these Kiowa blackberries, and they are doing splendidly. In fact, I'm getting so many blackberries on my own property right now that I just don't go out and forage anymore. And there's the some green ones back there. Those are the immature ones. They get as big as your thumb. They're huge. Now let's continue back a little farther here. These two beds that I said I was going to rehabilitate. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I have gotten back here and killed a lot of the weeds. And I put in a hugelkultur mound right here where there's a whole bunch of logs underneath this mound, covered with manure and covered with topsoil. And I planted some pawpaw trees. Pawpaws prefer, or they do well in partial sun, so I planted them right here. That's a good spot. Oh, and I got a new puppy named Guppy. Hey, Guppy. Say hello. There you go. That's Guppy, my puppy. Hopefully she'll keep the rabbits away. We'll find out. Moving on over to the chickens. My rooster died, but I've still got 3 chickens left, and they're still laying eggs. There's the 3 chickens. And we got, I actually got 4 peeps. One of them died, and I'm hoping that one of those peeps will turn into a rooster so that maybe we can breed some chickens here eventually. All right. As far as varieties of plants go, here in the Deep South, red potatoes grow very well, and they don't get attacked by a lot of nematodes. So I highly recommend the red potatoes. Red onions grow very well. They do very well in the heat. They'll keep going all summer long, whereas some of your white and yellow onions in the high heat and humidity just don't last. Of course, Florida speckled bean, which that's my 8th season with that, so that's kind of an heirloom for me by now. That's Dave's Florida speckled bean. Really adapted very well to this environment. Very heat, humidity tolerant, drought tolerant, and it's indeterminate, of course. So once it starts producing in June, it'll produce right up through November. Now we planted some purple asparagus back here, where it's a little cooler and we get a little less sun. So we're going to have some purple asparagus patch here. It'll be a year or 2 before I can actually harvest it. But it is coming up. It's doing well. You see we got some Swiss chard. Mostly I feed that Swiss chard to the chickens to get them greens, because I cannot let them out in the garden right now because they'll just scratch everything up, which is no good with new sprouts coming up here and there. Tomatoes. I did cherry tomatoes, plum tomatoes. What do you call them? Purple Cherokee tomatoes and Creole tomatoes do very well down here as well. Okay, some Ichabod eggplants. Here we go. Interplanted basil with my tomatoes this year. Finally get to doing things right for repelling certain insects. And I've got only 3 jalapeno pepper plants. I found the jalapenos medicinally are much better for you than the regular ones, and they tend to be more prolific as far as mass of peppers produced. And if you cut them up in rings and rinse out all the seeds, you really don't have any problems with digestion. And I like things spicy. Got a lot of garlic coming up in here too. You can see there's some garlic. There's some garlic. Had some garlic I bought at the store and didn't need it all, so I just came out here, planted it in the ground, and hopefully we'll come up with 20 or 30 more heads of garlic. And garlic goes all the way up to there. Now in here, I planted some white sweet potatoes, and again, I think I might have rushed them into the ground, planting them before they were ready to plant. But I do believe one of them has come up over here, and that's really all I need is one. And once I get one going, I can get it to take over the whole bed. I'd rather have it take over the bed right away, have them all come up, but it's only been a couple weeks since I put them in the ground. They might be waiting for it to just get a little bit warmer, and they're just fine in the ground. So, but those white sweet potatoes have a much better flavor than the purple yams that I've been growing. And I still got the purple yams because you can't kill those things. That's why I grow them. Anyway, you give me a little more variety. It's more like, it tastes like a cross between a sweet potato and a regular potato So you can make French fries out of these white sweet potatoes, or mashed potatoes are pretty good. Again, same combination with potatoes, onions, peas, and the beans. I alternated the beans with the peas, so they'll go up. And this is the taro. This taro has been in the ground for 2 years, and this fall I'm going to harvest a little bit of it and see how it's doing in there. My thought with this taro is I just use the greens when I need greens. Must be cooked, by the way, because it contains a chemical that will cause a burning sensation in your throat, and actually could cause your throat to swell up enough that you suffocate to death. So taro must be cooked, right? Okay, there goes puppies helping me out. But my theory with the taro and the purple yams is I've got food in the ground in case I run into a really bad scenario. Now, a really bad scenario would be a hurricane comes along and we get a little bit of saltwater intrusion back here, and between the wind and the saltwater intrusion, that pretty much kills everything. But with taro and purple yams, I've got a 4 or 5 month supply of food in the ground, and it'll stay good in the ground. So that's hopefully enough to get me through. Now here we got some peanuts coming up. They are slow to sprout this year. We've got we're in an ENSO year, which means there's no La Nina or El Nino, and that means it's a dry year for us. And last time we had that happen, we went all the way from March to November with no rain whatsoever. So I've been doing some irrigating, and while you can get things to sprout on city water and grow, it just doesn't happen as fast. I mean, a good rainstorm is what I need. Everything will come up all at once. All right, here we've got, of course, our lime tree, which finally produced 4 limes last year, and it's looking this year like I'm going to get maybe 20 limes. I see about 20 little limes all over the tree in there, so we're definitely going to get some limes this year. I'm liking that. Fig tree. With the way this whole grand solar minimum's been affecting our jet streams, what's happening is we're getting weather extremes in the wintertime, where we'll get a really cold we got early frost November 1st, which cut our season a little bit short, and then it slowly warmed up all the way through December until we got up to just about the end of December. It was up 75, 80, and that for a fig is a false spring. They start to put out leaves again, and then bang, right early January we got hit with a frost, killed all the leaves. Then it warmed up again, and we had another false spring through January and early February, and bang, another frost. It had leaves on it, killed all the leaves again, and finally on the last frost it didn't kill all the leaves, but most of this thing is dead, unfortunately, and it's just going to take a while to come back. So we won't get any figs this year, but we will get lots of bananas, because while we got several frosts, none of them were cold enough to actually kill the bananas. So we're going to get lots and lots of bananas. Oh, and last year, looking up that way, you recall I was trying to grow some mirlitone, also called chayote, and while it did grow and I got it up the trellis, the season wasn't really long enough to get any fruit. It's a really long season crop, and I'm told, well, you got to start those in like January if you want to get some squash in October. And boy, that's just a lot of space to take up in the garden for something that's going to produce for only a month. And while I was hoping they would come back from the roots in the spring, none of them came back yet. So the mirlitone chayote was a bust. Definite bust. Now down here I've got some peas again, beans again, but I've also planted cantaloupe and goji berries, and we are hoping that those goji berries will go perennial for us. I don't think there's any reason why they should not. They are actually zoned for, I think, zone 7 through 10 or 11. So we're right in the middle of that. They should do just fine. So again, got lots of cantaloupe down here, and we did the cantaloupe down here last year on the lower end of the yard where it stays wetter, and the cantaloupe did a heck of a lot better. So, oh, also I got 4 tree collards, and here's one of the 4 tree collards. And those are perennials as well. And hopefully they'll keep being greens or better variety of greens throughout the year. There's another tree collard, more beans, more peas. Had some extra broccoli that I planted in there, and more mustard that God sent up, sprouted for me. Elderberry tree came back, he's doing great, but it's overshadowing my mayhaw. So I may get rid of this elderberry tree because I've got other elderberry trees and access to lots and lots of wild elderberries. So I don't really need a lot of elderberries growing on my property. And I'd really like to get some mayhaw. This one's a little young, it's got a couple more years, but it surely could use some more sun. Now my mulberry tree, on the other hand, is doing splendidly. And as you can see, it's the first year it is getting actual mulberries on it. There you go, there's that good shot of a mulberry right there. There you go. All right. Now here is purple yams. Purple yams are doing great, except for right here. I don't know what's going on there. Dog, did you pee on those? She might have peed on. Oh, well, I see some problems throughout. Well, I said you can't kill these things. Maybe you can, but I did put down about 6 to 8 inches of warm, not hot, but warm, composted horse manure and shavings and whatnot. And so they may be reacting to that. It surely looks like a symptom of not enough nitrogen. And if you put down something that's not composted enough, it'll actually suck nitrogen out of the system. I think that's what we're seeing here, but I think we're going to let it go. I think it'll be fine within 3 to 6 months. And again, if we get a good soaking rain that comes out of the sky, that's just chock full of nitrogen right there in that water. Now our Sumo Orange is doing awesome. There are just 1,000 teeny tiny little oranges on this thing this year. So I'm gonna have to come out here when they start getting a little bigger and prune the excess oranges off so that we don't get a whole bunch of teeny tiny little oranges. Japanese plum is 6 years old, and I'm told that 7 or 8 years it'll start to bear fruit. So I got another year to get till I get some fruit from this Japanese plum, but it's doing pretty well. I said I had more elderberries. Yeah, I had one pop up right here, right by the septic system, and it's doing really good. So I'll let it go. I didn't have anything else planted there that I wanted. Over here, I let the dewberries go and actually encouraged them to grow more. And we're just getting a huge dewberry crop. That's the first crop of the year as far as fruit goes. There's a whole bunch of dewberries here. I really ought to get out and pick them, but I still have about 5 or 6 gallons of frozen dewberries. But I do get out here and eat a few fresh ones for breakfast every morning. That's a real good harvest, these dewberries. It's like a blackberry, only much larger. And the Kiowa blackberry that I'm growing is about twice the size of these, so you get an idea of how big those will run. Once we've got our grapes, we're gonna get some grapes this year. The avocado didn't really work out too well. It just got a little too cold one year and knocked them down. They're still growing. They're growing out from the base, and if these are grafted, which I believe they are, then there's no telling what kind of avocado I'm going to come up with. But I've got nothing else planted there. I'm going to let them go, see what happens. All right, another elderberry tree. Now this year God planted a whole bunch of thistle for me, and that's the 3rd year that God did that for me. So I looked them up on the internet, and by golly, thistles have got all kinds of great medicinal uses, especially the seeds. They're good for detoxing your liver. And with all the beer I drank over my life, maybe I ought to detox my liver. So I'm letting these things grow, and I'm harvesting these heads as they turn brown, like that one. I'll be out here in a couple days to harvest that. And I'll take it inside and very carefully, you grab it by the flower part with a pair of scissors. You cut it down at the stem, and then you go inside and you cut all those little leaves off, and then you can get in there and access the seeds fairly easily. You make a tea out of them. You make a tea out of them. Now let's see, what am I forgetting? In the back, I think that's about it. Our Moringa oleifera, 4th year. It is an incredibly successful perennial, and this year I want to take some cuttings and put cuttings beside in with every single fruit tree in here, because Moringa oleifera is a nitrogen fixer, fixes nitrogen in the ground, and fruit trees are nitrogen hogs. So it's a great companion plant. Here's another little elderberry along with a little banana. Who knows whether that'll do any good. Maybe it will. All right. Persimmons. Fuyu persimmons. Planted on another huge mound. Again, I like this mounding technique for planting these trees, because it gives, they will forever have their feeder roots in an area that will not get wet foot. These are not wet foot trees, and this is a wet foot yard. Anything I plant directly in the ground just doesn't seem to do too well. It just doesn't thrive. But these may thrive. We shall see. Again, you see I planted down on this side of the house the herbs that don't need quite as much sun, being oregano, thyme, parsley, chives, purslane, cilantro, and that's it. Did I say oregano? Okay, I just said oregano. Here's our second patch of dewberries. I just let these go. As part of my philosophy, if God sprouts something here that's going to grow food, I let it go and I encourage it. It's taking over the azaleas. That's fine with me, because I can't eat the dang azaleas. So there we go. You know, we're just going through the roof with fruit this year. And we got a Bing cherry growing right here. I'm going to let that Bing cherry grow. I might eventually take out the crepe myrtle that's behind it, because Bing cherries are real good for you if you turn them into a jelly, a juice, or a fruit leather. And I actually got these dewberries growing up and over the bottle brush, down the bottle brush, and down the other side. So I'm using my bottle brush as a trellis for dewberries. So the bottle brush is inadvertently producing something I can eat. More elderberries. And I'll tell you what, I can't have too many elderberries, because, man, I swear by elderberries here. It cures everything from toenail fungus to coronavirus. Knock on wood on that one. All right, moving around out front. Oh, I also, in all those mounds, I'm planting daylilies, which look like flowers, but you can eat the daylilies, the flowers, you can eat the flower buds, and you can eat the roots too. So it's kind of a hidden food source. I'll probably never really resort to those, but they're there. They're there if ever I need them. Now, fats in my diet. Getting enough fats in my diet is why I grow the peanuts, but I'm just not going to be able to grow enough peanuts to do that. So we planted some hazelnuts that are supposedly 1 year away from bearing fruit. They are bearing, well, there's some little pods there. I might get a couple small hazelnuts on this one this year. We'll see. They may fall off because it is a transplant. But they're getting flowers, so these are big enough, and I paid through the nose a little bit for them, $50 a piece. But they'll start fruiting within a year, and hopefully by next year they'll get 3 or 4 pounds of nuts off the 8 trees that I got, and that'll double every year. So within 3 to 4 years, I don't have to worry about getting enough fat in my diet anymore. That's another hazelnut. And that's a dead tree right there that never produced any fruit in the first place. Tarragon comes back as a perennial every year. That's awesome. My blueberries are doing A little better, a little bigger. It really, it's just, for some reason, this is just not good soil or a good spot for blueberries. But since I started adding manure to the ground, deep mulching with manure around my fruit trees is making a big difference. So they are getting bigger. They are getting more fruit, especially the blueberries. Peach tree, that was a little late, and it's got a problem back down in the trunk there. It had a borer got into it, and I believe it ringed around it, and it's dead. Same thing with that peach tree. It is absolutely dead. Got borers once again. So, hey, it's not a native tree, so it's susceptible. So, I'm gonna maybe go with more native stuff. This blueberry's doing well. Rosemary, another perennial herb. We got a small hazelnut tree that I've had for 2 years now. Another small hazelnut tree back there. You see, I got a pumpkin came up all by itself because I threw my rotten pumpkins out here, hoping that I would get some pumpkins growing. And so by the end of the year, on top of fruit, we're gonna have pumpkins all over the ground out here. It's gonna be awesome. That gives me space that I wasn't using before. Now I'm using for pumpkins. And you recall last year, I did pumpkins outside. Another blueberry tree right there. This peach tree is doing fairly well, but once again, it's just got a major branch. It's got some kind of problem, a borer or something. I don't know. Hazelnut, echinacea, lavender, more lavender, and my regular asparagus, which is doing pretty well out here. I probably should get out here and pull the dewberries out, but I think come fall I might transfer this back to the back. Brother Dave here, enjoying the heck out of my asparagus. Thank you much. I love you. God loves you. Have a blessed day.